The old house. I never believed in ghosts, spirits, or any of that paranormal stuff. I've always been the type to laugh it off when people talk about their haunted house or some weird experience. It was all just superstition to me, until last month. I live in an old house, built in the early 1900s, and people always joked that it must be haunted because of its age. I ignored them. The house had character, sure, but ghosts? Nah. It wasn't until one night, while I was sitting in the living room binge-watching some show, that things got weird that I remember it clearly because it was a Thursday night. The room was quiet, just the flickering light from the TV casting shadows on the walls. Out of nowhere, I heard this faint, scratching sound. It wasn't like the sound of branches against a window, it was coming from inside the house. At first, I thought it was the pipes or something. Old houses make weird noises all the time, right? But this was different. It was persistent, like something was deliberately trying to get my attention that I paused the TV, straining to hear where the sound was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the basement. Now, the basement in this house has always creeped me out a little. It's dark and damp, and there's this weird smell that never goes away no matter how much I clean. Still, I figured it was probably a rat or something, so I grabbed a flashlight and headed down the stairs. As soon as I reached the bottom, the scratching stopped. The air felt heavier, like the room itself was pressing down on me. I stood there for a second, feeling like an idiot for even being creeped out, and was about to head back upstairs when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't scratching, it was whispering. Now, I'm not someone who freaks out easily, but I swear on everything, I heard a voice whisper my name. Just faint enough that I couldn't make out the tone, but clear enough that I knew it was real. My heart started racing, and I did what any sane person would do. I bolted back upstairs and locked the basement door behind me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. I decided to sleep it off. But that night, I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. I kept hearing faint noises, footsteps, the creaking of floorboards, whispers I couldn't quite make out. But every time I got up to check, nothing was there. For the next few days, things got worse. I'd leave a room and come back to find things out of place, books off the shelves, pictures tilted, lights flickering. I even heard footsteps in the middle of the night, but every time I got up to check, no one was there. One night, I woke up feeling something cold brushing against my skin. I shot up, turned on the bedside lamp, and saw that my bedroom door was wide open. I know for a fact I locked it before going to sleep. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to understand what was happening. And then I heard it, that same whisper from the basement, but this time, it was right next to me. Get out. That was it. I grabbed my keys and my phone and left the house in the middle of the night. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get out of there. I ended up crashing at a friend's place, trying to calm down and make sense of everything. The weirdest part. Ever since I left, the house has been quiet. No more footsteps, no more whispers, no more things moving around on their own. I'm still trying to figure out if I imagined it all or if something was really there. I haven't gone back to check, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever will. So yeah, I guess I'm not as much of a non-believer as I used to be. The room. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to ghosts or anything paranormal. My friends used to share their creepy stories, and I'd just laugh, shrug it off, and tell them it was their imagination playing tricks. But something happened last week that's making me rethink everything. It all started when I moved into this new apartment. It's not exactly new, more like one of those older places that's been around for decades. The rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was decent, so I didn't think twice about it. The landlord did mention that the last tenant moved out in a hurry but didn't say why. I figured it was just some personal issue. The first few nights were normal. I unpacked, settled in, and got used to the usual creaks and groans of the building. I've lived in enough old places to know they make noise, so nothing bothered me, at first. Then, around the fourth night, I started noticing something odd. Every time I'd leave a room, I'd hear this faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was just pipes or maybe the neighbors. But it followed me. If I was in the kitchen, the tapping was in the living room. If I went to the living room, it was coming from my bedroom. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to old building quirks, but it kept happening. Things escalated when I started losing track of time. I'd sit down to watch TV or browse on my phone, and what felt like minutes would turn into hours. I'd glance at the clock and realize 2, 3, even 4 hours had passed. I didn't feel tired, but it was unsettling. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. My bedroom was freezing cold, colder than it had ever been since I moved in. I reached for my phone to check the thermostat, but it wasn't working. The battery was dead, even though I had charged it fully before going to bed. That's when I heard it. A soft humming sound, almost like someone was whispering a tune under their breath. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from outside or another apartment. It was right there, in my room, near the corner that I didn't want to move. My body felt paralyzed, like something was holding me down, but I forced myself to sit up. The humming stopped instantly. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was wide awake now, staring at the dark corner of my room. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. I felt it. It was as if the air in that part of the room was thicker, darker. That I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on every light in the apartment. I must have sat there for hours, just waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just a bad dream. Sleep paralysis or something. That's what I kept telling myself, but the next day, things got worse. Objects started moving on their own. My keys, which I always leave on the kitchen counter, were suddenly in the bathroom sink. The remote control was on the floor, even though I hadn't touched it since the night before. Doors would creak open and shut even though the windows were all closed. Then came the voices. At first, they were just faint whispers, like a conversation happening in the distance. But the more I ignored them, the louder they got. I couldn't make out the words, but they were angry. It was like someone was arguing in another room, but there was no one there. Last night was the worst. I had gone to bed, determined to sleep through the night and forget all this nonsense. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to the feeling of pressure on my chest, like something heavy was sitting on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My eyes darted around the room, and that's when I saw it. Standing at the foot of my bed was a figure. It wasn't clear, more like a shadow, but I could see it was tall, almost unnaturally tall, with long arms that hung by its sides. It wasn't moving, just staring at me. Though it didn't have a face, I could feel its gaze. That I don't know how long I lay there, frozen in terror, but at some point, the pressure lifted, and the figure was gone. I immediately packed a bag and left the apartment. I've been crashing at a friend's place ever since, and I don't think I can go back. That I'm not sure what's going on or if I'm losing my mind. But whatever it is, it's real. And I'm no longer a skeptic. The skeptic. I never believed in ghosts, spirits, or any of that paranormal stuff. Honestly, I always thought it was ridiculous. People love to tell ghost stories, but there's always a logical explanation behind it, right? That's what I believed, until I moved into this old house about 6 months ago. Now, I'm not so sure. The house was perfect, or at least I thought it was when I first saw it. It was a bit old, built in the 1920s, but it had charm. The price was right, and it came with a big backyard, so I signed the lease without a second thought. The landlord seemed eager to get someone in, but I didn't think much of it. I just assumed it was because the place was old and not many people were interested. The first couple of weeks were normal, if not a little quiet. The neighborhood was peaceful, and I enjoyed the space. The only thing that bothered me a bit was the basement. It wasn't like the rest of the house. It was damp, dark, and gave off this weird smell, kind of like mildew mixed with something metallic. I didn't plan on using it for much, so I just avoided going down there as much as I could. then the weird stuff started happening that was subtle at first. I'd hear creaking noises in the middle of the night. Again, I shrugged it off. Old houses creak, right? That's what wood does when it settles. But it wasn't just the creaking. Sometimes, I'd wake up to this faint tapping sound. It wasn't loud, just soft and rhythmic, like someone was tapping on the walls with their fingernails. I'd get out of bed and walk around, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but the moment I'd enter a room, the sound would stop. One night, about a month after I moved in, I was in bed reading, and I heard a loud bang coming from downstairs. It was so sudden and loud that I dropped my book and sat up, my heart pounding. At first, I thought someone had broken in, but when I went downstairs, nothing was out of place. The front door was locked, windows were closed. Everything was normal. But the air felt off. Like it was thicker somehow. I had that prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me, but I was alone. A few days later, I came home from work and something felt wrong the second I stepped inside. You know that feeling when you just know something's different? Like when you walk into a room and can sense that someone was just there. That's how it felt. My keys weren't where I left them, and a few picture frames on the wall were tilted. I was sure I hadn't left them like that. It wasn't just that, the air felt colder, like someone had left a window open, but everything was closed. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a strange sound. It was this soft, whispering noise, like someone was having a quiet conversation right outside my bedroom door. I sat up, straining to listen. I couldn't make out any words, but it was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was there. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, creeping out of bed to check. The hallway was empty, of course. The whole house was quiet. But as soon as I stepped into the hallway, I felt it again, that oppressive, thick feeling in the air. It was like the house was alive, watching me, waiting for something. The next day, I started hearing footsteps. I'd be sitting in the living room, and I'd hear someone walking around upstairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, like someone pacing back and forth. But every time I went to check, no one was there. This happened almost every night for a week. The footsteps, the whispers, the cold air, all of it became a regular occurrence. I started to lose sleep. I'd lie awake at night, heart racing, waiting for the next sound, the next weird thing to happen. It got to the point where I was too afraid to leave my bedroom after dark. The whole house felt different at night, like it was hiding something, and whatever was in it didn't want me there. Then one night, everything changed. It was a Saturday, and I'd been out with friends, trying to distract myself from everything that had been happening. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't stay out forever. When I finally got back to the house, it felt different, worse. The air was colder than usual, and I immediately noticed something was wrong. The lights flickered as I walked through the door. Not just a quick flicker, they stayed dim for a few seconds, then went back to normal. My stomach dropped. I wanted to leave, but where would I go? I tried to act normal, making some tea and settling on the couch with a book. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. Every time I looked up, I swore I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows shifting, flickering, but never quite there. When I turned to look directly at them, around midnight, the house went completely silent. I mean, no creaks, no whispers, nothing. Just this deafening silence that pressed down on me. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Then, I heard it, footsteps. But this time, they weren't upstairs. They were in the basement. Then my heart started racing. I'd never heard the footsteps down there before. Part of me wanted to run, just leave and never come back, but something in me was drawn to the noise. Against my better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the basement door. The door creaked as I opened it, and the smell hit me again, that damp, metallic scent, only this time, it was stronger. I felt sick to my stomach as I made my way down the stairs, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The footsteps stopped as soon as I reached the bottom. The basement was dark, darker than I remembered. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows, and the air was so cold I could see my breath. I stood there, frozen, trying to figure out what I was even looking for. Then, from the far corner of the basement, I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound, like something dragging itself across the floor. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw it dot a figure. It was hunched over, its limbs too long, too thin. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, or where its eyes should have been, were just empty, dark hollows. It was looking right at me that I don't remember running back up the stairs, but the next thing I knew, I was in my car, driving away as fast as I could. I left everything behind, my clothes, my furniture, everything. I haven't gone back, and I don't plan to. I don't know what I saw in that basement. Maybe it was some kind of hallucination, maybe I was just losing it after weeks of sleep deprivation. But whatever it was real enough to scare me out of that house for good that I used to be a skeptic. Now, I'm not so sure.